with special guest Steve Cole from the Newhall County Water District, and of course we have Matt Stone from Castaic Lake Water Agency. We're discussing a little bit of the idea that we think is probably going to happen. I mean, gentlemen, it seems like this is the train that is on a track, whether it moves slow or fast. Eventually, there's a merger for all sorts of reasons, certainly some fiscal reasons. But Steve, one of the things that I was looking at, as an agency in the Valley, I think we are a very powerful city, one of the largest cities in the state, certainly one of the more well-run cities in the state. I think it would make sense to have a water district that is also equally well-run and managed, and to have a singular unit that represents us probably makes fiscal sense. But what is the main objective? Obviously, we're going to have some savings, but those are generally, with all due respect to you two gentlemen, generally it's smoke and mirrors. By the time we're done, everybody's going to find a new project. There's going to be something. Everybody wants a pay raise. And oh my gosh, did you see the pensions? And we kind of absorbed. So maybe not. Just my cynicism of 21 years in the financial world. But that's okay if that's the direction we go and we choose to go as an agency, right? But what matters to me is the power we can wield in Sacramento and with some of these wacko environmental agencies that have millions of acre feet a year going out into the ocean from the Sacramento River to save some fish that is, who cares? I mean, really?
Yeah, I think it is one of the major considerations that we're looking at is when we're considering this, is the ability to set policy in this valley at a single table where we can voice and debate and have those discussions and arrive at policy conclusions that make sense for this community, and then we can advocate for them. The water use efficiency kind of mandate that came down from the state this last cycle is a perfect example of that. Being able to go up and have a very strong voice at the state level is important. It's becoming increasingly more important with every mandate that gets put into the water community.
What do you see as the future day one, mergers done, day one argument, issue, concern that we would address as a unified body?
Yeah, I think for our district, one of the biggest thing is how are we going to regionally reuse water, and specifically the recycled water.
Yeah, I would agree.
In the valley, it's something that's been at the table and on the plate for a very long time. It's something that we need to be proactive in the way that we're going to be able to do it, and frankly, having separate water agencies have made that investment very difficult. And I know our district is interested in being able to remove some of those barriers and have some success.
One of the concepts, guys, just so you can kind of follow along, is we're going to have, whether it's a trucking system or a pipeline system or something in between, where they're catching some of this water and then we go back to the top, if you will, and recharge it. Is that the general system to close that loop?
That's certainly, we are doing a feasibility look at that right now. But in conjunction with that, there's just what we like to call in the business traditional recycled water use, where we're able to take highly treated recycled water and reuse it in the community. And generally that's on outdoor landscapes where there's a lot of water use.
And that gives us the ability to use water that doesn't necessarily have to be treated to a potable level where people are going to be able to drink it, yet still have that access.
And really, this water is still, although most people wouldn't really want to, it's still safe for human consumption most of the time after the amount of treating it's gone through. It just has the stigma attached to it, correct?
Would you say, yeah?
It's been used for well over 30 years at that level of treatment throughout Southern California. One of the first areas to use it was Irvine, and just down in Las Virgenes area, there's quite a bit of recycled water use that's been going on for decades. So we're actually a little behind in our valley in terms of use for landscape and expanding that system.
You know, I speak at some of the high schools and colleges over the last few years, and one of the big issues, of course, is water. And it's interesting when you see and I can say this because it's my show, you guys can't because you're wearing those shirts, the far left-wing wackos, progressives that are out there that believe that water is a certain Oh my gosh, look, the same amount of water that is on the earth today is the same amount that has been on when dinosaurs were here. You got it, folks? It's either an air, a gas, a solid, or a liquid. That's kind of it. So it's a matter of, and there's plenty of water. Now it's just should be a discussion, in my opinion, on should we desalinization, right? You turn salt water, you split it up, take that stuff, dump it out 6 miles into sea and spread it out. They do that all throughout Israel. They turned a desert into an amazing oasis of fresh crops. They did it all throughout the Gulf states, which is Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates. All of those Gulf countries are using desalinization. There is plenty of water. We push out, how many acre feet per day go out on the Sacramento River because of a silly fish?
It all depends on how much rainfall you get. So the number moves.
Okay, so let me guess, and you can tell me if I'm politically correct. So you can do the hot-cold thing like we were trying to find something when we were kids called the Easter eggs.
Tell me what year and what month it is.
Yeah, so let's just do an average. Would you say 1 million acre feet a year? Is that low or high?
I'd say that's low.
That's low.
Yeah.
So 1 million acre feet. Now, what does that mean? It means you take 1 million acres and you fill water 1 foot deep. So far, so good?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So that means that much. And if you take a look at the farmers that are in the Central Valley, they're suffering a water shortage, aren't they? Some of them, certainly some.
Some of them, and it's a little, I know you want me to keep it simple. There are complicated water rights hierarchies that have developed
Certainly.
over time as to who was there first and what
Yes.
kind of contracts. But yeah, in the whole, the less senior the water rights holders, the more dramatically impacted they have been.
So to keep it simple,
Yeah.
we are saving a little fish because some people say it was actually planted in there. I've read those stories, but who knows? Other people said aliens have landed. So if this fish is real and actually found, 3 fish?
There's
All right.
the
Was it
spring
three?
spring run Chinook salmon, fall run Chinook salmon.
There it is.
And the Delta smelt.
Delta
just to name the
smelt.
top 3 that I can think of right off the top
I
of my
think there
head.
were 3 Delta smelt found in that got stuck in the intake valves. Or the bottom line I want you guys to research, because this stuff is all available now, is to understand that of course we want to keep our air clean and our water clean, but do you understand that there are jobs lost, and those people pay taxes when they make money, and they provide for their family, which means they don't receive welfare or Obamacare. They actually have their own family financial, and we take that away when we push water out to sea instead of have that same water come in and water crops and give people jobs. So it's certainly, there's layers and there's bureaucracies and there's attorneys and there's contracts, and I get all of that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the problem versus the place to find the solution, but that's just my simple mind.
Yeah, I think we've entered into probably the most complicated attempt ever to balance different public interests that's ever been undertaken. Between you've got mandates from state law and federal law to protect species and habitat. You've got a water system that, the main quote-unquote interchange for all the water is the delta that comes from Northern California. So for that part of our supply, it goes through a neighborhood that's not particularly conducive to pumping water in reverse flow in the same estuary where you have protected fish. And the arbiters of that are, the other thing is there are multiple venues. So you have federal jurisdiction, you have state jurisdiction. And even with the best of intentions, it's a nearly impossible problem to solve. And you throw in an obstructionist mentality, and I always look at it as there's just a million levers that can be pulled to frustrate even a consensus process. So it's a tough one.
Yeah, it almost seems like it has to be thrown out and start over again. And you just say, let's put people first, and then we have business, and then we have the environment. And if you put it in that order, right, I think you end up with a healthier approach, but that's just my mind.
Just have to get 51% in California to vote with
Yeah,
you.
remember it used to be 60% until these same old wackos said, we want to be able to pass laws and tax people instead of 60 or 66 or whatever the percentage was. Now it's 51. Unbelievable.
And as the water providers, of course, obviously we each have our own individual opinions about the right solution. At the end of the day, we come in every morning with the job of trying to make it work.
Sure.
With the hand we're dealt.
And we think that's going to be achieved with
diversifying our supply is a key to that.
Have we looked at, just like LA City Water and Power owns plants and water rights and reservoirs all up and down California. There are city employees who've never stepped foot in the city, who live up in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and have we thought about that as an agency, going up and establishing a pipeline from the Willamette River or the Columbia River and bringing that down?
Well, we haven't gone above the California border, but probably a little known thing is Castaic Lake Agency actually did do a couple things in their history. One is we acquired the water rights of another small state contractor who was essentially tired of the farming business, and we basically own the rights and land in something called the Devil's Den Water District north of us up in the San Joaquin Valley. And that adds to our overall water rights on the state contract, our water allocation on the state contract. The other is we bought into a firm water supply, which has a really long, complicated name, but it's basically the Rosedale Rio Bravo Buena Vista project.
So
that gives us 10,000 or 11,000 acre feet per year of firm supply.
So we have places that we can go out, buy this water. So would it be safe to say, based on my analysis, that water only comes in any of three forms? So would it be safe to say that we do not have a water shortage? We instead have a regulatory, environmental, conversation, legal battle?
Well,
because I went out to the Pacific Ocean and I saw lots of water. And I've been down to the Colorado and I've seen lots of water.
Yeah. So both these things are true. Here in our local watershed, we're in the 6th year of drought. There's no doubt about it. We've had below average rainfall and a couple years critically low rainfall. And so you see that mostly as it's manifested in the groundwater levels in the valley. And, the aquifer has been through that cycle before, but we're getting to historic levels, and that's what it's designed to be able to do as we try to manage it. But yes, on the other side, we've acquired a lot of supply. We've stored water in the Central Valley. I didn't get to that. We have a lot of water in storage. So when the state came in last year and mandated everybody in the state cut back 25%, we had water that we could have served to customers that we legally, we had nowhere to serve it because we were legally required to get everybody to cut back. This year they relaxed that a little bit. We have an allocation from the state because we had a relatively wet winter. We're actually adding water to the storage we already had. So from a long-range plan standpoint, we've tried to be prudent and develop ways to store water away for those dry periods. But it's also true, we really do have a drought locally here in the Santa Clarita Valley. That wet weather has been more in the north part of the state than in the south.
So we've had a drought. That means rain doesn't fall here. But last I checked, pipelines and big rig trucks can bring stuff down. Now, obviously, a big rig truck is not very efficient. But if we can have a pipeline system that's set up to bring water, and I spoke to a politician once who is quite interested in this matter. I won't go into the details, except basically you run some pipeline out in the middle of the ocean, you come in, out 5 miles, you bring it down the coastline, back in, bring it into San Jose, bring it in Los Angeles, and now you have, and if it leaks, water went into the water.
And you brought up Israel. I think that's a great lesson, and Australia. When you have shortages, it spurs innovation, and it also changes the economics, right? This is a show about economics and money. So as something gets more rare, the price people are willing to pay to bring it to them goes up. But also the premium on efficiency goes up, because you're going to feel a lot worse about wasting water that you spent 3 or 4 times as much to bring hundreds of miles to you. So we're trying to really follow that dual path of efficiency and looking for innovative but still hopefully reasonably cost-effective ways to bring water. And the ideas that are out there that even go beyond, I guess, today's definition of cost-effective, do extend all the way out to offshore pipelines. Or there's a guy that wants to tow bags full of water down from the Pacific Northwest that's been out there for years. It's just not economical yet.
Yeah, I'd say the energy transfer, energy for water is a big issue.
It's like driving an RV full of water. It's not very cost-effective.
It's certainly not going to grow crops.
Yes. Yeah, especially. So maybe there's a transfer issue, right? So for my home, I have a water storage system, and the water that you were going to supply to my home now becomes farm water, et cetera. We're going to take another quick break, folks. We'll be back in just a minute. I'm Arif Halaby, along with Matt Stone and Steve Cole, your local water experts. There's a merger that's going to take place. We're going to find out more about that when we return. Total Financial Solutions, Safer Money Hour. We'll be right back. Yes. Hey, welcome back to the show. Total Financial Solutions, Safer Money Hour. Arif Halaby, along with special guests Steve Cole and Matt Stone, your water experts right here in the Santa Clarita Valley. Also, my co-host Logan Halaby. Logan, I know one of the things that we were looking at least that you had mentioned, is some of the reusing of the water, recharging the system. Maybe, Matt, you can explain a little bit about what recharge means. What does that mean in English to us non-water experts?
Sure, there's kind of two concepts wrapped up in that fortune cookie. One is recycling water, which is taking traditional wastewater and treating it to a high level so that it can be reused either on landscape or for groundwater recharge, or potentially out in the future there are people even looking at super high level treatment to get it to be able to be reused directly. And then the issue of recharge is, think of a groundwater aquifer as if you had one of those old bathtubs and you had it in your backyard and you filled it up with gravel and sand and you started to pour water in it. You wouldn't, the water's underneath the sand, but as you add water, that level in that tub rises up. And so recharge is the act of intentionally creating ways for water to get back into those aquifers.
And there's a natural filtering process, Steve, that water goes through as it goes back down into the system. There's two big issues that matter to me. One of those is, one, we need to be telling our kids the truth. Water doesn't disappear. It's still here. When you water your lawn too much, it goes down and eventually finds its level and becomes part of the groundwater system. Is that right?
That's so right, depending on where it's released and what your aquifer systems are in that specific area.
So where does it eventually go? Like, let's say I just run my hose on my front lawn and it sucks into the system, right? Goes down into the water.
It'd probably most likely stay in the local area of where
and then
where it's at, and then evaporate. If it makes it to the the stormwater system, say it goes into the curb,
into the drain,
into the drain. Those drains in our valley all daylight into the river system.
And that's where I'm going next. That river system, are we capable of damming up the river system with some of those? I've seen them. They're almost like an airbag, if you will, to pause the water from going downstream so that it has time to sink into the sand and recharge in the places that matter. Right? We could put one here, put one there, build like mini little lakes, or if you will, little reservoirs. Can we do that?
Yes, you can do that. There are many regulations that come into place when you consider doing that. One of the things I mentioned earlier on the feasibility study that we're looking at, we are looking at doing something similar to that, but most likely off the river itself, because when you manipulate the river itself through any kind of dams or things like that, the regulatory framework to accomplish that gets very complex.
So back into the lawyers and the lefties and the environmental and the... I can say that, you don't have to.
Certainly there is a process that you need to go through to accomplish a project like that.
It seems like the common sense has left the building when it comes to... And then they kind of will discuss and berate you into, one, you're not smart, they are, and two, common sense isn't really common. It loses its mindset, and here's where I'm going with that. There's a downriver supply in Ventura. Those farmers are expecting a certain amount of water to come downriver. And they didn't like the salinization, the salt that was in that water. And they had some problems with it. And they said, oh my gosh, Santa Clarita, you guys are, these tanks that you have for soft water are creating so much salt in the system. And apparently we've done some testing, and when you go upriver it's coming in just as salty or more salty than when it's going out the back door, which means we have to clean up water that we never even dirtied in the first place. So far, so good?
Yeah, I think the regulation really focuses on whenever you're discharging water back into a receiving body, you have to meet a standard that's set by the regional board. And that's where the controversy was, as I understand it. I've been doing a lot of reading in the last year to get up to speed and talking to folks too. So yeah, that essentially state law allows the regional board to set a standard, and then you have to meet it. And there are different ways to meet it.
My understanding was there were 2 or 3 testing sites as water came into the Santa Clarita area that tested at a greater salinization than we were pushing out the back door, and therefore the farmers in Ventura and the county, et cetera, were getting water, in some cases, cleaner than we ever even received it. So we were being forced to clean water that we'd never even dirtied, if you will.
And particularly with salts, the other way to look at that is there's a total tonnage of salt that will come down into the lower part of the watershed. So the concentration level, per unit volume is one thing, but if you're adding more volume of discharges with more salts in total, then the total amount of tons of salt that are coming down into the lower watershed are of a concern to them too, because they're going to concentrate down there in that part of the watershed.
So there's a natural process, and then but the ratepayers here had to pay to clean up that water for the Ventura farmers?
They had to do what the state board required them to do to put their water back in the river,
And it wasn't, dance on a corner with the tutu. It was literally go to work, make money, put it into a bucket.
Build some facilities to take the salt out to the standard that was set,
And that means that the ratepayers had to pay more money.
Definitely,
So if you guys don't think water is a serious issue, I make a little bit of light of it because I think it's one of the most ridiculously managed systems in the state, with layers and layers of legal and lawyers and all sorts of things. I think you have to worry about 2 things in your financial life. Number one is when we have one system, you need to hold these people accountable. And I think rightfully so. They want to be held accountable, and they want to hear your voice. That's going to come through your regulatory mess that we're doing. YourSCVwater.com. That's where you're going to find out some more information. YourSCVwater.com. We're done with our show today. Thanks for listening. I'm Arif Halaby, Total Financial Solutions, Safer Money Hour. Thanks to Steve Cole and Matt Stone.
Thank you.
Thank you.